I wrote a book called Explanations and Corrections in the Gospel of Luke, and this video is going to be about a chapter called The Meaning of the Darkness of the Sun and the Moon. This is to help people understand metaphor in the Bible. Luke had to get rid of metaphors that were used by Jesus and that are repeated in Mark and Matthew because they were misunderstood. For example, in Matthew 24:29 in the Douay version, the words Jesus says, "The sun shall be darkened and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven shall be moved." Well, some people even today take that literally, but Luke did not. He changed that. And just since I tried to write a book about Luke, but because people are so confused or misled, not understanding Hebrew metaphors, and being misled by doctrines derived from the comments of Josephus and the books of the Maccabees and other sources, and Hippolytus, having to make a lot of detours to explain things. Now, and this is Luke 21, beginning in verse 5 through 28. And so I highlighted verses 5 through 20, which verses are spoken by Jesus to the apostles in the second person. And then the next blue highlight highlights words that are spoken in the third person concerning the unbelieving Judeans. Now, the reason for the bold is the bold represents words that were added or changed by Luke to explain things or get rid of metaphors. And the section I'm going to begin, which is going to require probably several videos, is our reading Luke, "And there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, by reason of the confusion of the roaring of the sea and of the waves, men withering away for fear and expectation of what shall come upon the whole world." Well, this what I highlighted in red is a parenthetical remark, an explanation by Luke about what all of this language means. This is metaphorical language from Isaiah about the darkness of the sun, the moon, and the stars, and the distress of nations because of the waves. That all comes from Isaiah, and the meaning of all that for a person that does not know the Hebrew Scriptures is men withering away for fear and expectation of what shall come upon the whole earth. So I'll begin reading from this chapter. I'm trying to write this book in a logical manner, but have had to make digressions up to this point. Up to this point, I have mentioned that Jesus addressed the four apostles in Luke 21 until verse 21. And I commented on Luke 21 through 24, which is all spoken about the Jews who were to suffer God's vengeance. I had to dwell at length on the abomination of desolation in Luke 21:20, and also on the times of the Gentiles in Luke 21:24, because they are misunderstood. And I covered Luke 17:20 through 37. The reason for that lengthy digression was that Luke moved certain verses in Mark 13 and Matthew 24, verses that were wrongly included in Jesus' speech. So I had to interrupt the flow of the book to explain Luke 17 to show the kind of miraculous salvation that Jesus actually predicted for believers. Now I need to resume my explanation of Luke, specifically of Luke 21:25 through 27, which verses are about the terror felt in the whole world. Luke explains that the language in Matthew and Mark about the darkness of the heavenly bodies is figurative. I will show that elsewhere in the Hebrew Scriptures, the darkness of the heavenly bodies is usually also figurative. Luke knew that. Even to this day, some interpreters, not understanding Luke, wrongly think that eclipses and other heavenly oddities are signs of the end. According to William Guthrie's translation in 1752, one of Cicero's letters to Atticus said that the sun seemed to have fallen out of the universe. So Cicero said, translated into English, the whole scene is now changed, and so are my sentiments. The sun seems to be extinguished in the system of the world. As there are hopes while there is breath in the body of a sick man, so I continued still to hope while Pompey remained in Italy. So when Pompey left, it was as if the sun went out and as if there was no breath in his body. So Cicero spoke Latin, he wasn't a Christian, and yet he knew how to understand and use this kind of metaphor. Cicero had sided with Pompey against Caesar. Then he discovered that Pompey planned to destroy Rome by sending in an invasion of foreign armies, and also by causing a famine by means of a blockade to keep Rome from getting grain. So Cicero lost all hope, and as a result there seemed to be no light in Italy. And that interpretation was from Thomas de Quincey from a book in 1853. I'd read another earlier translation that had a different, simpler interpretation, but the general idea was still the same. There's no way of confusing Cicero using the metaphor of the sun going out because he had lost all hope. Joseph Willard wrote, and here we may observe that darkness and light are frequently used in a metaphorical sense in the Holy Scriptures. Darkness is put for trouble, perplexity, and calamity. Thus Joel, speaking concerning the famine and other judgments under which the Israelites labored, calls the season a day of darkness and of gloominess, a day of clouds and of thick darkness. And Zephaniah, prophesying of the judgments of God, which were coming upon Judah, says concerning the time when they should fall upon them, that day is a day of wrath, a day of trouble and distress, a day of wasteness and desolation, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness. These and many other passages make it evident that darkness is sometimes used in the Holy Scriptures metaphorically for trouble and calamity, and it is with propriety thus used. In days of public calamity, how distressing is sometimes the prospect. Which way soever we look, trouble and melancholy appear, and gloom is apt to seize upon and overwhelm the mind, as darkness in the night involves the body. I believe he means in modern English envelops the body. This is from a 1784 sermon. So people throughout history have been able to understand the metaphors in the Bible, but unfortunately even today people think metaphors in the Bible are literal, and they did in the first century too, which was a major reason that Luke wrote his gospel. The writer of the quotation above said that darkness is put for trouble and calamity. This is metonymy, the use of another noun instead of the noun really meant. I think that in order to figure out what darkness means in a given scripture, you should look for the literal language that is used as its synonyms. Willard cited Zephaniah. Zephaniah 1:14 through 17 reads, "The great day of Jehovah is near." This is from the American Standard Version. "It is near and hasteth greatly, even the voice of the day of Jehovah. The mighty man crieth there bitterly. That day is a day of wrath, a day of trouble and distress, a day of wasteness and desolation, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness, a day of the trumpet and alarm, against the fortified cities and against the high battlements. And I will bring distress upon men, that they shall walk like blind men, because they have sinned against Jehovah. And their blood shall be poured out as dust, and their flesh as dung." Several figures of deprivation of light are used in that passage: darkness and gloominess, clouds and thick darkness, and blind men. This figurative language is mixed with literal language. A day of trouble and distress, a day of wasteness and desolation. Darkness probably means distress in this passage. Amos 5:18 through 20 says, Woe unto you that desire the day of Jehovah. Wherefore would ye have the day of Jehovah? It is darkness and not light, as if a man did flee from a lion and a bear met him, or went into the house and leaned his hand on the wall, and a serpent bit him. Shall not the day of Jehovah be darkness and not light, even very dark and no brightness in it? A footnote in a commentary on Amos 5:20 says, darkness, a picture of calamity and distress. Light, a picture of prosperity and salvation. Amos 5:18 through 19 contains synonymous parallelism of two figurative expressions, a metaphor about the darkness of the day of Jehovah, and a simile about running away from beasts to explain the metaphor. Unfortunate, there is no literal language used that is used in parallel, words like calamity or distress, to make us sure of the meaning. We have to figure the meaning out by understanding the simile and then comparing the metaphor to it. Alexander Carson explained that metaphors are, in their literal sense, absurdly false, but similes are true. If the day of Jehovah were truly dark, it would not be a metaphor. The simile uses as if, a conjunction of comparison, as if a man did flee from a lion. If a day were really as dark as night, your efforts to escape would be ill-fated, like the escape of a blind man. The man who ran from the lion into a bear and then got bit by a snake as soon as he thought he was safe was likewise making a doomed effort to escape. These figures of speech illustrate Amos's prophecy against the 10-tribe kingdom of Israel, namely that Jehovah will send an avenger from whom the Israelites won't be able to escape, and they will go into captivity. Amos 8:9 through 10 says, And it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord Jehovah, that I will cause the sun to go down at noon, and I will darken the earth in the clear day. And I will turn your feasts into mourning, and all your songs into lamentation. And I will bring sackcloth upon all loins, and baldness upon every head. And I will make it as the mourning for an only son, and the end thereof is a bitter day. A figurative sentence, an absurdly false statement, is followed by a literal sentence explaining the meaning of the figure. The original readers understood immediately that God was not going to literally make the sun go down at noon. The real meaning of the hyperbole is the sudden end of all joy in Israel and the beginning of mourning. This was part of Amos's prophecy against Samaria, the 10-tribe kingdom. The figurative darkness in several passages above refers to the condition of terrified, hopeless men. Despite some difference in the precise interpretation, the fact that these passages are metaphors describing fright, distress, etc. is clear from the context. Commentators shouldn't say that Amos 8:10 is a prophecy that God will make the sun literally darken at noon, as Archbishop Usher did, because Amos provides the meaning to the careful reader. Many commentators have said that the sun and moon will be literally darkened in the end times because of their incorrect interpretation of Matthew. There are some passages in the Bible where an eclipse or smoke might be the cause of darkness, but there are many more scriptures where the figure of darkness is used in contexts where there is no suggestion of an eclipse or smoke. So the reader should be inclined to assume that the darkness is metaphorical, and especially when Luke says it's metaphorical. And you can see that Luke says it's metaphorical by the way he changed the wording of Matthew and Mark when he wrote the Gospel of Luke.